Let's have a little discussion about what a thought experiment is and a little overview of the directions that I've got for you here. Thought experiments are used in all different kinds of areas in philosophy, but also really in law and medicine and business, really a very widely used conceptual tool. And they're pretty fun for the reason that you get to kind of run the experiment. There's a certain kind of objective structure that you have to work within, but it's really your experiment to run. One of the main goals is to kind of elicit or draw out some of your intuitions that may not be all that clear to you when you just kind of think about these things, but when you step into the world of the thought experiment, a well-designed one is capable of kind of drawing out your own ideas, principles, and intuitions in a way that's more visible to us. And we can really see what our kind of moral principles are more clearly sometimes. Also, since we need to make some kind of judgment in the thought experiment, we can also be held to a standard of consistent reasoning, or by parity of reasoning. If you say this about the thought experiment, wouldn't you also have to say the same thing about the relevant real world phenomenon? And that's how we can kind of make a bridge from the world of the thought experiment to the real world. As you'll see, the world of the thought experiment, i.e. the scenario that's described in the thought experiments, the trolley going down the track, the violinist that we're hooked to, the scientist Mary that's only seen black and white, just to give a couple of examples, often seem very far-fetched and not the kind of things that we've ever seen in the real world, or sometimes that we could even imagine happening in the real world. So we need to make some kind of bridge between the world of the thought experiment and the real world. That's what I was just referring to by parity of reasoning, or for analogous cases, or to draw out our intuitions more clearly. There's some important analogies or similarities between a thought experiment and a regular experiment, like in a laboratory. In a laboratory, we also set up a pretty artificial environment that isn't exactly like what you would find out in nature or out in the real world. Everything's all kind of jumbled together, and many variables are kind of influencing the one variable that you want to study and that you've got a hypothesis about. And in a laboratory, we can isolate just the variable that we want to study, and we can get conclusions about it because we have a greater power to isolate and control the environment. So a similar kind of thing is happening in a thought experiment. We have these kind of seemingly bizarre hypothetical scenarios for that same purpose. So we can really more closely isolate, study, understand, and get some judgments about one specific phenomenon. Maybe it's killing versus letting die. Maybe it's the statement that all facts are physical facts, just to give a couple of examples. So in the thought experiment, that's kind of what's going on. These hypothetical, seemingly bizarre scenarios are isolating specific variables clearly for us, just like in a regular experiment. Also, in a regular experiment, there is a hypothesis that we either want to confirm or disconfirm, and that's kind of the point of the hypothesis. And if you look at the pages there, all have a hypothesis there for you. And the question is, kind of after you've gone through it, at the end of the day, do we either end up confirming or disconfirming the hypothesis? On each page, I'll have one there for you if you look. And that's really, what we try to do in a scientific experiment as well. That's kind of the point of it. So let me take a look at the 4 steps in the directions here. The thought experiment is kind of fun for one reason, in that it's yours to run. And so while I've got these directions here, and those are things that you're bound by, there's really a lot of open texture that you can kind of execute or follow these in various ways. And as you'll see in the directions, there's a number of cases where you can chime in and either modify or analyze or interject your own ideas and point of view within the framework established. So doing both is really what we want to get to. Definitely keeping within that structure, but then you kind of really running the show, adding analysis, modifying certain things, developing conclusions, stuff like that. So first, I'm looking here at the 4-step directions. I'm asking you to first, right off the bat, tell me what your conclusion is. That might sound like putting the last thing first, and it is really. I want to know right at the beginning, what's your ultimate conclusion here? What's the bottom line? When it's all said and done, what do you conclude from having gone through this process of thought about the topic in question? So you can develop conclusions to different areas, you can generalize, but give me something straight off the bat so I can see where you're going to end up. So also asking you to concisely tell me what the experimental situation is like. And that is to give a little description of the possible world that the thought experiment describes. And you'll see all of them ask you to kind of consider a bunch of assumptions, and we can think of it as like that's describing a possible world that we are to imagine ourselves inhabiting, or that's the world of the thought experiment. It's a possible world within which we are asked to make a certain judgment. And again, the way these possible worlds are described is strategic so that certain aspects of that world are really highlighted, maybe even more than they are in the real world, which is kind of messy and everything all kind of goes together. Okay. So when you describe the scenario, you might think to yourself, well, there's a lot of information here missing that would be relevant for knowing what to do or say. In the trolley thing, like if I would pull the lever or not, I would want to know who the people on the tracks are. Are they family members? Are they friends? Are they criminals? Are they doctors? Who are they? That might seem like relevant information that's missing. And really in all of these, we might be able to think of some relevant information that's missing in the description of the thought experiment that seems relevant. Well, if that's true, put it in. And there's a point here where I ask you to kind of consider modified scenarios where you might change it just a little bit, add or subtract some data to the scenario. And here's the reason for that, is to see if adding any additional data changes your judgment. Would you get a different outcome if you took away a certain fact or if you added a certain fact? The reason why that's important is that if the addition of a certain fact changes your judgment, then we can see clearly that your judgment is keyed to that kind of data. And that's what's kind of running our judgments here. And we at least know that. That's what our judgment in this situation is responsive to, this kind of fact. On the other hand, if we added in some information, but we ended up with the same conclusion, then we can see that our judgment isn't really keyed to that kind of data here. So it's actually interesting and creative and useful to consider slightly modified scenarios and to see if you would get the same judgment. Okay, so then at the end of the day, well, at least at the end of the thought experiment, you will get an answer to a question. You will make a decision. You will say yes or no. There's something asked of you to do, and that's where you come in. You flip the switch. You say yay or nay. Is the ship the same as the other ship? Just giving examples of situations that you'll see on the ones on the list. So consider what you would do, and then what conclusion does this really imply or support? Your decision should be a justification of a certain position. And sometimes it takes a little thinking to see exactly what that would be, but that's the point of all of these, that whatever you say will commit you to a certain kind of philosophical position. And then generalize from that, and you'll get a certain philosophical conclusion. And that is what I'm asking of you. Could be fun. All right, I look forward to it.